News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Sources tell Bloomberg the U.S. and Iran are considering extending their ceasefire by another 2 weeks to allow more time to negotiate a peace agreement, and that sent markets to record highs. We check those markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 up 0.3%, NASDAQ up 0.8%. The Dow is down 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.28%, and the 2-year yield at 3.76%. Footwear company Allbirds, which made wool sneakers, was valued at more than $4 billion back in its heyday. Before it closed down for good, it announced a new business plan, AI computing infrastructure. Allbirds is changing its name to Newbird AI and says it secured $50 million in financing to become an AI-native cloud solutions provider. Allbirds' stock is now 624% higher. Back to the latest in Iran. A naval blockade continues around the Strait of Hormuz. Bloomberg Economics chief geoeconomics analyst Jennifer Welch says more talks are likely, but the Strait of Hormuz presents a unique challenge.
Going into these talks, it seems that the U.S. might be open to some sort of joint tolling venture with Iran that could lead to a reopening of the strait, but that's not a return to the pre-war norm. And I think it still leaves a lot of questions on the table for the global shipping industry and for other oil producers in the region.
Bloomberg's Jennifer Welch on Bloomberg Intelligence. The Washington Post reports the Pentagon is also sending thousands of additional troops into the Middle East as the president tries to pressure Iran into a deal. Pakistan's army chief has arrived for talks in Tehran in the latest diplomatic move to ease tensions and arrange a second round of talks. Even as President Trump indicates the war with Iran may be nearing an end, the oil shock continues. WTI near $92 a barrel, Brent crude topping $96 a barrel. Former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson says now is the time for countries to be working together.
It's going to be very important to try to bring it together. That's why I think it is so important that the U.S. be talking with China and other major economies so they've got some basis to coordinate if and when there is a global crisis.
Hear our entire interview with former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson on the next edition of Wall Street Week, Friday at 6 p.m. on Bloomberg Radio. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission is investigating suspiciously well-timed trades in the oil futures market ahead of policy pivots by President Trump related to the war in Iran. The investigation follows concerns about potential misuse of material, non-public information tied to Trump's shifting stance on the war and has been urged on by 2 Democratic senators. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva says the global economic impact will depend on the length of the war in the Middle East and how much damage has already been done.
Even if the war ends tomorrow, it would take quite some time for the recovery to kick in. So we have to keep in mind that the impact is already baked in.
Hear our entire interview with IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. Energy Secretary Chris Wright says the Trump administration is not likely to issue a new waiver allowing countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil as part of any efforts to tame those high fuel prices.
I don't think you'll see that extended. But we're just trying to be pragmatic, because the problem here is in Asia and then in Europe. In the United States, fortunately, we're just by far the world's largest oil producer and world's largest refiner of the products we use. So one of the biggest things is how can the United States help mitigate this globally?
Energy Secretary Wright spoke at the Wall Street Journal Opinion Live event. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he understands if the Fed wants to wait to cut interest rates until there's more clarity on the war's impact on the economy and inflation.
I think the Fed has been wrong on their inflation projections, that it is clear the core is coming down. If they need for their own sanity to wait on interest rate cuts, I understand it.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke at a CNBC event in Washington. When he was asked about the probability that Kevin Warsh will be confirmed for Fed chair by May 16th, Bessent said he didn't know, but that he hoped everyone will work to have him there by then. President Trump says he'll fire Fed Chair Jay Powell if he does not leave that post on time.
If he's not leaving on time, I've held back firing him. I've wanted to fire him, but I hate to be controversial.
It is not clear that the president can legally fire Powell. The Federal Reserve Act allows removal only for cause. Trump made those remarks in an interview with Fox Business. Morgan Stanley reported a second quarter beating earnings expectations, bolstered by record returns across its wealth management business for a second straight quarter. Shares of Morgan Stanley more than 4% higher. Morgan Stanley CEO Ted Pick says the war in Iran does create a risk through imported inflation, energy, and food.
And that becomes challenging. That queers the cost of capital, and effectively then you start talking about the R word. The good news is we're not talking about the R word.
Hear our entire interview with Morgan Stanley CEO Ted Pick on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. Bank of America traders pulled in the business's highest quarterly revenue in more than a decade, riding a wave of volatility that pushed the firm's stock trading desk to an all-time record. Herman Chan with Bloomberg Intelligence.
Looks like fixed income trading missed a little bit of relative consensus, but equities beat. So that's what we see there.
Herman Chan of Bloomberg Intelligence. Bank of America shares about 2% higher. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.